Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about king activity in Rook Endgames. Now first of all, in Rook Endgames there are four very important things. And the first one is active king. Now the second one is an active rook. Then we have a rook on the 7th rank, because as you know, rook on the 7th rank is just a beast. It's just very active, it gets all the pawns and everything. And the fourth is put a rook behind a passed pawn, because that's going to be the easiest way for you to just push the pawn and promote it. So in one of our previous videos we've already looked at an active rook, so now we're going to go over an active king. Okay, so we're not going to go through the opening, of course, because that's not our topic. They quickly transposed into an endgame, as you're going to see here. Okay, they tried queens. And now you can see in this position, black has a bishop pair, black has two bishops, which is usually an advantage, because these two bishops really work well together. They're better than this bishop and a knight. So black has the initiative here, but also you can see that white has a majority on the queen side, which is of course better for him because he's going to create a passed pawn, and this black's king is going to be far away from getting those pawns. But still, this bishop pair promises black the initiative. So that's why white played bishop to b5, trying to exchange those bishops off. This was a very creative and very nice move. So now black could have taken this bishop, but you can see this knight is pretty good here, and he didn't do this, but rather he took the knight on c3, and we can see white took the bishop, and he took this pawn with a check, white recaptured and black recaptured. And now we can see that we have totally symmetrical pawn structure, right? But there's one difference in the position. First of all, white traded one pair of rooks, and then he came to this c3 square. And now I want you guys to think about which is this big difference in the position that I talked about. Okay, so the difference is the king's activity. You can see that this king here on c3 is really closer to the center. You always want to have your king close to the center. It's centralized and it's easier going to go to where he wants to go, right? I mean, you can of course feel it that the king here on c3 is better than on a1, because there it's doing nothing. And if we look at black's king, it's on g8 and it's going to take him a long way to come to a good square. And white is just going to come to this c5 square, and this king is going to be very good. It's going to be pressuring this pawn here, is going to be threatening to come into black's position, and also with the help of his rook he's going to try to win the game. And that's why black tried to centralize his king, and he played king to f8, and now we can see rook to b1. Now a very important thing here is that black has an open file here, but the thing is that this file is actually not that great for black, because as you can see he has no squares here to go to with his rook, and this file is just useless for now, because this king is also controlling some very important squares. And white's rook on the other hand is very happy on this file. It's going to jump to this b7 square, or just, you know, as we said, the third rule is to put your rook on the 7th rank, and white is going to try to do this. So okay, we can see that this position is really better for white because of the active king and also a rook, but it's still not that easy to win. Black played king to e7, and now we have to look at the option of coming into a king and pawn endgame with rook to b7. And I mean, when black plays rook to d7, and now if we exchange the rooks, this is going to be a draw, because this pawn here on a6 is controlling a really important square here on b6, and our king is not going to be able to come to black's position, and black is going to be able to hold this position. So we don't want to trade rooks here, but white played e5, getting more space, also not letting black's king go to this d6 square maybe, and just go to c7 or c5. So this was a nice move by white, we can see h5 and a4. Now black played to rook to d5, getting his rook to a better square, also preventing a5, so that's nice. And white played rook to b7 check, black played rook to d7. Again, we don't want to trade the rooks because it's going to be a draw. So white moved to b8. Now black again wants to trade, so he plays rook to d8, but white just retreats to b4. And black goes back to d5, still preventing this move a5 of course. And now we can see g3. We can see that black is really holding on to this position, and it's really not that easy for white to get a win out of the advantage that he has. But okay, let's see what white did. Okay, black checked white's king, white moved to b3, and we can see rook to d5 back. And now c4. This seemed like a little bit of a strange move to me when I first saw it, but I mean, what is white going to do? He can't do anything else, and this is just a nice move, because you still have to know that black is hardly going to take any pawns here, because then white's rook is going to come here and take this pawn, and we can see this a pawn is going to be pretty strong here. So this move makes sense, and black just played rook to d2, attacking the h pawn, but he's not going to take it because our rook is going to get really active. Maybe it was better to play rook to d3 check, and when white moves to c2, then rook to d7. Maybe this option was better here, but I'm not sure. He played it to d2, and now we can see a5 by white, pushing this pawn further, so it's going to be closer to this promotion square. And when it comes to a6, it's also going to support this rook leave to b7, where the rook is going to be very active on this 7th rank. So black played king to d8, trying to get his king to a better square, to c7, because it also protects some squares here. And white just played rook to b8 check, we can see king to c7, and rook to f8, attacking a pawn, but we can see rook to d7, just protecting this f pawn. Now, taking this pawn here on h2 is of course pretty bad, because you just take this pawn, and then you come closer with your king, or you just take this pawn also, and this is of course not good for black. So he defended the pawn with rook to d7. It's a better choice. Now, which piece should white improve? He should definitely improve his king. Now, his king is really not that well placed here, and can you see a square where this king is going to be just a beast, just a monster? That's correct. c5 is the square for the king, because from here it's going to be pressuring this pawn, it's going to be threatening to come into the position, and it's not going to let black's king activate after, for example, a6, because it's going to be protecting also this square. So this is really the best square in the position for the king, and that's why white went for it. He played king to b4, and now we can see a6 by black and king to c5. Now if we look at the position, because of this active king here and this pretty good rook here on the 8th rank, we can see that black has some weaknesses. Even though the pawn structure is symmetrical, black has weaknesses and white doesn't. We can see that this pawn here on a6 is a weakness, this pawn also, and also this pawn. Because white is attacking all these pawns, I mean not this a6 pawn at the moment, but you're going to see what happens, and black has to defend it. Now black is not attacking any of these pawns here. This pawn here, this isolated pawn, is not a weakness, because black can't attack it, and also this pawn on a5, and that's why white's position is really good here. But it's still not that easy. Like I said, it's still not easy. You have to use the right technique to win this game. So black here played g6, and white attacked the pawn on a6. Okay, black defended it with king to b7, and we can see rook to f8 back, and of course king to c7. We can see a little bit of repeating. And now pause the video, guys, and think about what should you do to win this game with white. You have your king really well placed, your rook, everything is alright, but now how do you break black's position? Now the move that white played here was h3. And because you can't do anything, black is still holding to this position, he's defending everything. So you have to break here, you have to break this pawn structure and try to just get a pass pawn and just win the game. So that's why he played h3. Now of course black can't play rook to d3 because of rook check, and when he moves somewhere you can see this king takes the pawn, and this is just losing for black, so that's obviously not the right thing to do. And black just played king to b7. And now what do you play? You play g4. You want to move these pawns on the king side. So black recaptured, you recapture, and king back to c7, because otherwise what is he going to do, right? He doesn't have that many options. Of course this move here, a rook to e7, is not an option because the king comes in. That's why he has to play king to b7, king to c7, and so on. And now white wants to activate his rook, because from here it's just attacking this pawn and that's all, right? So the way to activate it is of course through this file, h file, coming somewhere, you know. But first white played rook to a8, attacking the pawn and just pushing black's king to a worse square than c7, that's to b7. And now we can see rook to h8. And why is this b7 square worse than this c7 square? Because from the b7 square the king is not protecting this d6 square from where this king can come into action, and that's the main reason. So black played king to c7 back, and we can see rook to h1. Now black plays rook to d2, and that's exactly what white wanted. Now he played rook to h7 back, attacking the pawn. It might look weird, but this is his plan. When black retreats the rook to defend the pawn, the brilliant move in this position is g5. Black actually resigned in this position, because he has nothing to do. Now why can't black play king to b7? What is the point? The point is this dirty move f5, and this is just a brilliant move. As you can see, if black does nothing, then you just take the pawn, right? And white can't recapture because you captured the rook, and because of your active king, you can come here to this b6 square, just take this pawn on the next move and just win the game, right? So he has nothing to do here. And of course, if black takes the pawn on f5, it's also losing because of this move e6. Also, you can see there's again a pin. He can't take it because of the rook. And I mean, what is he going to do now? It's just over. He can play something like, he can move the rook, but then of course this is again over. He has to take the rook and you're going to promote. So he basically doesn't have anything here. And if he moves to d8, then you take the pawn, he has to move back, and you push this pawn, and it's over. That's game over. You're going to promote to a queen on the next two moves, I think. So that's just a brilliant move, g5 and then f5, just breaking black's defense. And all of this was possible because of white's really active king on c5 and a very active rook. Of course, more active than this rook, which has to defend the pawns and does nothing, and also this king, which also defends the pawns. So that's the power of an active king and active rook working together and just destroying the opponent. So guys, I really hope that you found that video useful. Please share the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video.